Alright, so welcome back to Nanga Parbat. So I just recently did a review, and so now I'm doing the how to play video for this game. So let's get started talking about how to play this game. Let's start with the basic setup of the game, first of all. Everybody starts with a cube here, and they're going to put it on the 0 mark. Then you're going to take all of the animals that you have, meaning if you lose an animal, you don't want to lose an animal because there's no extra animals in this game. But you're going to put an animal on each of these locations in each square in each region. So there's there's actually 6 squares in each of the regions. So you're going to randomly put the animals in to each region. And so, like, for instance, I've got 2 snow leopards over here. These red pandas are really close to each other. These these tars or tares, are right next to each other. But I try to randomize it as much as possible. It's pretty random for sure. Now, so obviously when you play the game, the animals won't always be in the same spots the next time you play. Then obviously every player is going to get all of the camps. There's 12 camps in total, and all of the hikers in their color. Now, obviously, the player who has the most points at the end of the game wins. But the way the game ends is one of 2 ways. So, when you score points, with the exception of the red panda, because you can score points when you take red pandas sometimes, when you use these cubes here, you're going to use these cubes up here to try to score points. And we'll talk about how that works later. But if all players have used up all of their cubes here, all of these cubes here, because we all have the same amount, if we have used them all up, then the game is over. So if we have used all of these to score points, then the game is over. But if only one player has used all of these, and there's, still a player who still has 1 left, the game isn't over yet. Okay, so that's one way the game can end, is if all the player cubes are used to score points. Another way the game will end is if a player has used all of their hikers. So if you have used all of your hikers, and all your hikers are either here or have been replaced with camps, then the game will be over. Now, when I say they're replaced with camps, these tents, okay, are camps. And when you gather a lot of hikers together in an area that are adjacent to each other, when you gather a lot of them, you can exchange them for camps or tents, if you will. And then you'll get points, obviously. But the hikers you used that are being replaced with these tents are not going back into your supply. They're going to be basically put back into the box. So you will not be using these ever again. And that's really important to note, because you don't want to accidentally get them mixed up with the other hikers, because that's one of the ways the game will end. That's one of the ways the game will end, is if you have used all of your hiker meeples here. So that's another way the game will end. So at the end of the game, there actually will be still animals here on this player board. On this board here. You will not be able to fill in every single square in the game. So there will still be some animals that haven't obviously been taken, for sure. But that's something to note. Now, also, so that's how you end the game, and obviously having the most points at the end of the game wins. Now, whoever's second player will get to decide where this guide is going to go. Okay, whoever the guide is the region that you have access to on your turn to take an animal from. Okay, so on your first turn, on any turn, the first thing you're going to do, unless you have some animal ability action you want to use, because you can use animal ability actions whenever you want, and as many as you have, even if you just acquired the animal, you can use the ability right away, okay? And we'll talk about that later. But you're going to take an animal from the region that the guide is certainly is currently at. That's what you're going to do. So you can't just take whatever animal you want from the board. It has to be where the guide is. And since there's 6 regions, if the guide is in region 3, then you can only take animals from here. Obviously, if all animals have been taken, and somehow the guide is in a region that has 0 animals left, which could happen, I suppose, then you get to actually move the guide before taking an animal in a different region. So you get to move the guide to a region that has animals, at least one, and then you can take the animal from that region. But that's the only time you can move the guide on your turn to your advantage. Otherwise, this guide will not move by your will. It moves by which animal you take and what number was under the animal that you take. So if, for instance, I was to take this Baharol, now I'm not sure how to pronounce some of these animals, Tar and Baharol, but if you were to take this one, this blue one here, the Baharol, well, it was on the number 1 square. So that means that after, of course, you take this animal and place the animal into the corresponding area where the animal is indicated, okay? So red pandas, Baharol, yak, musk deer, tar, and snow leopard up here, you're going to put your hiker of your color, obviously, into the spot that the animal was at. And then, because that was the number 1 square, this guide is going to move to the first region at the very top. Okay, so there's obviously some strategy taking certain animals that you might want, but also taking certain animals from certain squares to prevent your opponent from going to a region that has some animals you would rather them not get. Like some red pandas. Maybe they're only 1 point behind you, and you don't want them to go to a region that has a red panda, so that way they will get 2 points. You can try to block that by taking an animal from a different number from an area that does not have a red panda currently because it was removed, because someone took it already, or, you know, obviously because it might have been moved via one of these abilities or something like that. Now, adjacency is cool. Now, adjacency can be anything within the region that is, you know, so if a hiker was here and a hiker was here, that's adjacent. If a hiker was up here, that's adjacent. You know, and of course, the same thing with animals. All these animals here are adjacent to each other. But you'll notice there are some white dots connecting these regions. There's some white dots here. There's some white dots here. There's one connecting the first number of region 4, and there's dots connecting the the fourth number in region 2. So these two are also adjacent. These are adjacent. These are adjacent. Obviously, these are adjacent. These are adjacent here. You get the point. So if there are dots connecting the 2 squares, that's also an adjacency. So when you're when you're using some of these abilities here and moving animals and hikers around, you can also move them into new regions, into different regions as well, because that's adjacent. And then, of course, if you're exchanging hikers for camps and they need to be adjacent to form a group, then you can even take, for instance, if you had a hiker here, a here, here, and here, you can actually take all 4 of these hikers and replace them with camps, because this is all adjacent here. So that's another thing you can do. I like that. That's really cool. So that's another thing you can do. That's another thing to note about adjacency rules. Now, so I talked about moving the hiker depending on the number that you obviously take. So obviously the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take an animal from the region that the guide is currently at. Okay? That's the first thing you're going to do. Mandatory, for sure. You take the animal, you're going to place it into your player board on the corresponding animal symbol, And then another thing you're going to do is then you're going to take your hiker. So here's my hikers. They're all sort of off camera, but here's my hikers. Then you're going to take that hiker and place it at the spot where the animal was just at. And then obviously the number where the animal was at is going to be where the region that this guide is going to go to. So if it was on number 1, it's going to go to the number 1 region. If it was on number 3, okay, if it was on number 3 and it was currently in the 3rd region, and you took the number that was currently number 3 and you exchanged it for a hiker, the guide actually stays right there in region 3 because it's the same number. So that's another thing you can do. You can sometimes take an animal and it will actually cause the guide to stay there. Maybe there's no good animals left. Maybe all the red pandas have been taken, and so you don't want your opponent to take a red panda, so, there's no more red pandas here, so we'll just keep the guide here, and my opponent won't be able to obviously get a red panda anytime soon. So yes, there's definitely some strategy involved with those red pandas. You're definitely going to want to either get them when you know you're going to score some extra points, but you're also going to want to get them to prevent your opponents from getting extra points later down the road as well. So there's definitely some strategy there of trying to get all the red pandas you can get. Now, you'll notice up here we have three numbers. We have three sets of numbers here. And so let's see if I can zoom in on that a little bit better. And can we get it a little bit higher? Okay, there we go. So, you'll notice there are numbers and circles on both the top and the bottom. Okay, now if you're going to score points with all the various stuff here, you're going to have a certain amount that you're trading in for. In this game, you're going to be trading in animals and hikers. So for instance, we have three different categories. You can trade in the same species of an animal, a certain amount, for a certain amount of points. You can trade in different species, and since there's 6 different species maximum anyways, you can trade in, if you have 6 different species, you can trade them in for 8 points, for instance. If you have 6 hikers all adjacent to each other, you can trade them in for points, obviously, for a bunch of tents, and you'll score 7 points. And then once you do that, once you take a spot that you scored points, you're going to put your cube on this little score track here, meaning that no other player can trade in that exact same amount for that again. With the exception of over here, we have 2 sections for 3s. So if you have 3 of anything, there'll be 2 spots you can get some points. So like for instance, if you had 3 of the same species, you could first go here, getting yourself 6 points, and then if somebody else wanted to trade in 3 of the same species, they could still put their cube there. I mean, they could still put their cube here, and it'll score them 4 points. Won't be as much as 6, but at least they can score some points that way. So that's the only 2 spots that are the same number, because then this is 4, and this is 5, and this is 6. 6 is the max. So you can never trade in more than 6 of anything for points. And obviously, you're only going to be able to do this once per each of these. So same species, different species, and obviously camps. Now, obviously, that's definitely going to be the way that you utilize all these cubes, because if you run out of all your cubes doing that, and all players have used their cubes, that the game will obviously end that way. For sure. And you're definitely going to be keeping track with these cubes, scoring a bunch of points that way. So that's basically the points in the game and how that's going to work and how you're going to score points, obviously. But there is one thing that can help with your scoring tracker. Now, maybe you're trying to get the same species. This is where it's really contingent. Maybe you would like to trade in 6 of the same species of animal, but you only have 5 red pandas. Maybe you only have 5 red pandas. Well, there is a way to change that up. This is the Baharl, if I'm pronouncing it correct. This animal here is a wild. It can count as any species. So if you don't have enough that you want to score a maximum points for the red pandas, like let's say you had only 4 red pandas, but you had 2 of these Baharls here, you could also, they could act as 2 red pandas, and then you'd get your 6 red pandas and score points that way. So you'll definitely want to get these, if you can, to help you score same species, especially, for sure. That could work. And also, because it does count as a wild regardless, maybe perhaps you don't have all 6 different species, but you have a couple of Baharls. You can pretend the Baharl is the species of animal you don't have. Maybe you don't have the snow leopard. You have the other 5, but you also have an additional Baharl. You could say the Baharl is the snow leopard and then score 6 points. And then obviously trade in 6 animals to score points that way. Now, if you use that, if you trade in animals to score points, then you won't get to use them for their abilities. These obviously don't have abilities except for the wild and obviously getting to score points with the red panda. But these abilities here, these 4 abilities that you have access to, if you use the animals before they get utilized for their abilities, you won't get to obviously use them for their abilities. So that is something to note. I definitely found myself not trading in any animals that were above this line here until they reached down here before I started trading in animals to score points, because I really wanted to use the animals that were up here for their abilities. So let's talk about their abilities. What do these abilities do? Why do you want to use them? Well, let's talk. So, first of all, let's just bring this board up closer. So if you have a snow leopard you haven't used for its ability, when you use it for its ability, you're going to move that snow leopard down here. Same with the other 3 animals here. Meaning once you've used the ability for that particular animal, it's going to go stay down here and you'll never get to use it again. But if you had multiple snow leopards, then you just move one down and that one won't be used for an ability again. What does the snow leopard do though? It allows you to exchange hikers that are adjacent to each other. So you can move your opponents and yourself hiker-wise if they're adjacent to score better for you. Maybe you're trying to score some tents, okay? And that's pretty much the same with all of these here. But maybe you're trying to get some adjacency of hikers together so you can, take them out and, score some camps by having a bunch of adjacent hikers together. But maybe, you have some blue up here, maybe. You have one blue here and there's a pink here, okay? And you want this blue here so that way you can score a bunch of points. If you had the snow leopard, you could exchange them, exchange places with them because they're two hikers, okay? So, and they're adjacent. So now, the blue would be here and the pink would be here, and voila, now I can score points. Now, there is one thing to note. When scoring points, if you have, for instance, if you think, I'm going to score points on animals this turn, and I'm going to score points on hikers. You can only do one or the other. You can't be trading in a whole bunch of points all at once. You can only do one per turn. So, for instance, I could trade in a bunch of hikers for some camps, score points. If I do that, then I can't, on the same turn, I cannot trade in animals for anything. Likewise, if I was to trade in the same species of animal for some points, I would not be able to trade in different species of animals for on the same turn for some points. Same thing, I would not also be able to obviously trade in hikers for camps on the same turn. So you're definitely going to want to do this when possible. You also want to plan ahead and make sure that you don't miss your chance to score some points for sure. You don't want to miss your chance. If you're going through the motions, it could be possible that you might miss your chance to score some points, and then you won't get that chance later down the road. It's quite possible that could happen. Because after all, your opponents, they will score points too, and they'll be starting to block up spots up there. And then you'll be like, no, I can't do that now, or I can't do as many points as I want, or now I have to get an additional one just to score points because they went to the exact same spot I was. And so that can happen. So you're definitely also going to want to keep an eye on that too. But yes, you can, with the snow leopard, you can exchange hikers that are adjacent to each other, which is pretty simple and easy to understand. Now, the tar here, or tear here, this animal, if you use its ability, you can exchange a hiker and you can exchange an animal, obviously, in 2 different spots. I found myself doing that quite a bit. Same thing with the next one. Same thing with, not so much with the snow leopard, but these 2 I found myself doing quite a bit because there was spots where I wanted to take a certain animal, but I didn't want the number that the animal was on. So I switched places so that way I could move the guide to a location where my opponent won't be able to get a good animal or something like that. I found myself doing that quite a bit. There's some strategy for sure involved in doing that, planning ahead almost. A little bit. And then, so that's what you can do with the tar. You can exchange a hiker and an animal. And that means, once again, if this is also adjacent too, so now you can even, obviously, they could end up in different regions. Okay, so here's the musk deer. Its ability is you can switch animals with another animal. So you can switch one animal with another animal anywhere you want. So that's another thing, anywhere, which is cool. I like that you can switch an animal. So, and it does say anywhere. Okay, so like you can take an animal from here and put it in the other region up there, and then that animal that was in that region you can put down here. So that's something you can do. That's really cool. So, you know, there's definitely some strategy involved with that. These must be adjacent, okay? But if it doesn't include the hikers, like the musk deer here, it can be anywhere. So that means you can switch an animal with region 1 with region 5 because it says anywhere. So that does add some strategy involved for sure. And then last but not least, the yak has an awesome ability that I found myself using every single time I could. Okay? The yak, you can actually use the yak to move the guide to any region you want. Okay? So maybe my opponent put the guide into a region I don't want to take an animal from. And I have a yak. I can move the yak down, and then the yak is basically going to force the guide to move to a different region of my choosing. So then now I can choose, I can go for the region I want with their animal I want, and maybe even try some area control at the same time. So the yak is probably the best ability here, and I say that because if you're going through the motions, if you're going through the motions, you'll probably not really use these abilities too often. You might find yourself passing on these abilities. But if you're going through the motions, you will most likely still use the yak ability quite a bit, because there are definitely going to be times you're going to be like, oh, I want this animal. Like, I want this red panda, but my opponent put me in a region that doesn't have one. But I have a yak, so let's move the yak down and put the guide into a region I want. But basically, that's how the animal abilities work. Now, I think I've explained, obviously, how the game works to the full extent that this game works. So I think we'll leave it at that. So thank you guys for watching this how to play video of Nanga Parbat. And don't forget to leave a like if you liked this video. And I'll see you guys again next time.